Oh, hello there. Hello and happy October. My name's Adam, and I made a new RPG for the Game Boy Color called Gumball in Trick or Treat Land. You play as Gumball, a little guy who falls into Trick or Treat Land by accident and is trying to collect 7 magical scarecrow patches in order to return back home. It's the perfect season to check out the demo on Steam. That version contains the first hour of game plus an extra hour of bonus content, and it's absolutely free. Links in the description. In the last video, I talked about how this project came to be and why I decided to do it solo. Today, I want to talk a little bit more in depth about the design process for the game. And in honor of the Halloween season, we'll brave the shadows and explore a place called Vampire's Landing. Vampire's Landing was always planned to be one of the final areas of the game from the time I had an overarching plot sketched out. Something about a medieval-themed castle area housing vampires in some far-flung corner of the map just felt right for this design. This is one of the 4-ish sort of hub towns in the game, and it's probably one of the most straightforward traditional Game Boy era RPG designs in that it contains just a few houses and a dungeon. I liked the idea of sprinkling a few vampires throughout the whole world of Trick or Treat Land, but keeping most of them concentrated in this one area to help it feel distinct. Before this area of Vampire's Landing was even sketched out, I was writing NPC dialogue making reference to it to start building a sense of the scale of the world of Trick or Treat Land. I arrived at 4 different designs for the vampires, each with a different appearance, title, personality, and set of attacks. My pre-alpha vampire design was pretty rough around the edges. I was going for a sort of Kid Dracula vibe with this guy, but I found it difficult to show all the features that I wanted to in a 16 by 16 pixel sprite design. I wanted a little bit more vertical space to work with, so I expanded it to a 16 by 32 sprite design for the vampires. The next vampire I designed was more of a Nosferatu type guy. He was intended to be more of a vampire minion and less of a main character. I felt that he had a lot more personality, and he was the placeholder sort of vampire NPC sprite that I used for most of the middle phases of development. Finally, toward the end of development, when I really got to do Vampire's Landing and its dungeon in full, I went through and revamped those first 2 designs and added 2 more as well. At this point, I had a lot more practice drawing sprites, and I felt a little bit more confident making designs that felt a little more unique. The naming of these 4 types of vampires was inspired by a tabletop campaign that I'd written many years ago that took place in a prison that was run by vampires. We created different classes of vampires based on their jobs, and we arrived at a naming convention similar to like Magic the Gathering with an adjective and a noun. So the Vampiric Dandy is the most sort of Kid Dracula inspired, and he was made just by iterating on that first vampire design that I showed you. The Vampiric Monk was made by iterating on that second design, and he was made to feel at home in the Vampire Cloister, which is the main dungeon of Vampire's Landing. I was feeling excited about the Muppets when I finalized this design, and I think that really comes through in the speaking animation. The Dastardly Count is more of a straight-ahead Dracula vibe, what with the Widow's Peak and whatnot. He also hovers. And the final design I did is called the Chiropteran Friar, who's like a more of a gargoyle type cousin of the Vampiric Monk. I liked the idea of a vampire with a little bit more muscle here as well. There is also a Vampire King, who I will not show you in this video. So, the vampires had their own town, but I also like the idea that they had their own sort of institution that governed their way of life. So the long-planned vampire dungeon evolved from a castle into a cloister, which is like another word for a monastery. I liked the idea of a place for the vampires to live away from sunlight, away from judgment for their lifestyle, where they could drink blood and sleep in coffins, away from the world. This dungeon was the last one that I designed for Gumball and Trick or Treat Land, not counting the demo exclusive one. And it is the most really top-down my design process ever got. After the tangled mess of dungeon and overworld overlap that was Mean Street, which I will tell you about another time, I wanted to create some contrast by creating a final dungeon that felt self-contained, had clear objectives, and had a relatively easy to understand layout while still feeling lively. This setting also provided the perfect opportunity to write some spooky vampire-style music, whatever vampire-style means. The motif that inspired the Vampire Landing's music is Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor, which is some of the most spooky vampire-y music of all time. You know the organ thing that goes da-da-da, da-da-da-do. I wanted to use that as a starting point, but I also wanted it to feel more at home in a monastery setting, like something that you might hear Gregorian monks chanting. So I took that motif, I changed it slightly, and I put it in the Dorian mode, which always gives me big monastery vibes. I started with a drone, that is a long held out pitch, and began improvising a melody over top. First that vampire theme with an extra note added. Then a slight variation, and then a response that ultimately resolves back to that drone pitch. I cleaned up and quantized that improvised melody a little bit. Then I took it up an octave, and the Vampire Cloister music was born. Then I took the themes from that improvised melody and I created the Vampire's Landing theme and the battle theme out of that. It's a more up-tempo and fully harmonized version of the same idea with like a B section and a bunch of extra melodic material. The result is one of my favorite tunes in the game. I hope you enjoyed this little slice of insight into my process. This project was a labor of love, and I hope it delivers a fun treat for the spooky season. You should check out the free demo on Steam or at gumballgame.com. We'll be releasing the full version of the game on Steam and on a cartridge next year, so stay tuned for that, and make sure to check out the links in the description to stay up to date on the project. Thank you, and from Gumball and all of his friends, happy Halloween. Happy Halloween! Woo!